Brothers and sisters, just before Lent, we heard Jesus invite all disciples all across time, including you and me, to be holy as his heavenly Father is holy. And he also showed us that being holy means living in the presence of God rather than trying to live as if we got all our stuff together and that we make no mistakes. That holiness is living in the presence of God. On Ash Wednesday, when Lent finally arrived, we hear that this invitation to holiness, living out of our imperfections, which is symbolized by the dust we wear on our heads, that our imperfections are, as disciples baptized into his resurrection, our imperfections are configured, are shaped into the image of Christ, as symbolized by the shape of the cross on which we bear this imperfection upon our foreheads. And that a fruit of living in holiness out of these imperfections is being an apostle, a representative of Jesus in the world. Last week, we encountered Jesus as he went out into the desert to be tempted by Satan. That is one of the challenges of living a life of holiness, especially out of our imperfections, because of the temptations. And the temptations, at least as far as I am concerned, has nothing to do so much with thinking evil thoughts per se, but just being constantly distracted from the goal. All these little things that kind of are these like squirrels and rabbit holes all around that seem to keep me away from the task of living a holy life out of my imperfections. Today, we see how this living out of our imperfections and striving to be holy can really bring us to an encounter with Christ that can transfigure us, that can transform us even more into a person who is holy. We see this in the vision that we see on the mountain, where Jesus is transfigured and Peter, James, and John don't quite know what to do about it. They know that they are to follow Christ. They see the benefits of following Christ and his being transfigured. Yet there's still like a cloud over them. That life of holiness seems to be like living in a shining cloud that casts a shadow. That's what it says in today's gospel. A shining cloud casting a shadow. How can anything shiny cast a shadow? Usually shiny things disperse a shadow. Nevertheless, here we find the disciples, here we find you and me living under this shiny cloud that's casting a shadow. I don't know about you, but for me, this cloud that a disciple lives in is like all of the uncertainty of life. There are uncertainties on a global scale, which we don't have hardly, or at least it feels like we don't have any kind of control of at all. And then there are uncertainties on a more local level. Certainly there are always uncertainties about parish life and the church. There may be uncertainties in our families, in our relationships at work or in school. There can be all of these unknowns, and the unknowns that we know and the unknowns that we don't know. There just seems to be so much uncertainty living a life of faith, or just living any old life, really. And I think the biggest problem or the biggest pain in all of this uncertainty is not the uncertainty itself, but at least for me, the biggest problem is not wanting to have the uncertainty in the first place. I want it all spelled out for me. But that's fantasy. That's make-believe. From the beginning of human existence, that never existed. And even if you look at the scientists, that's supposed to be the place where we get the most certainty. They themselves revel in the fact that everything is always so uncertain. That your science book you have to throw out in about 5 years because there's always these new discoveries that expand upon what has already been learned. All the world is uncertain. That's the way it is. There is a cloud that we live in, whether we are holy or not. But our holiness gives us a way to live through the clouds. This is what we learn in the Transfiguration today. Holiness gives us a way of living through the clouds of uncertainty in our lives with the gift of faith that Jesus gives to us in his presence in our lives through a relationship with him. This is what I mean. I don't know about you, but I enjoy fog when it's around. And I enjoy fog the best when I look at it outside my window and kind of see it, the pall of mist over the land. And I just think it's the coolest sight to behold. Almost as cool as the stars at night. It's comfortable looking at the fog from the safety of my house. It's not so cool when I have to drive in the fog, especially at night, and especially on roads that I may not know too much about. I have found myself driving in fog on unknown roads, and my inner response was anger. Not so much fear, but anger. Mad at myself for having put myself in this predicament in the first place. My brothers and sisters, I think that that's the first step in a life of discipleship, a life in a relationship with Jesus. It's stepping into that fog and experiencing it. Seeing the fog from the safety of our homes is one thing, but that's not a life of discipleship. A life of discipleship is beginning to drive in the fog. Now, when I drive in the fog, this is how it works for me. And I actually can find great joy in driving in the fog when I'm able to do this. When I'm able to know that the road is in front of me, and that if I go really slow, the road will always be in front of me. My headlights will always announce my presence to people coming that I may be advancing toward, and their lights will always be a sign that there's somebody out there. So I begin to look for signs. I begin to take small steps. If I am on familiar roads, I know that I'm going to get there. I'm not going to get there that quickly, but I'm going to get there. And because I'm kind of familiar with the path, I know the road where the turns are, where the stops are, and all of the little landmarks along the way. To me, these signs, these roads, these little landmarks, that's our faith. That's what's given to us by being a parish. That's what's given to us by being a church. That's what's given to us by being a people who are in relationship with one another and find in those relationships a relationship to Christ. Can you imagine a parish that's like that? How much great life might come from such relationships, from such an existence? This faith transfigures our lives. This faith gives us a confidence. This faith gives us a hope. This faith gives us a joy for moving through the clouds of uncertainty in our lives. Knowing that there's a road, knowing that there are signs, knowing that there are landmarks, and knowing that there are things that we have to go around. We may not see the path clearly, but we know it's there, and we know we can follow it. That's a life of faith. That's a life of placing one's trust in a God who is merciful. Just like Abraham in today's first reading. Go, God says to Abraham, and I will show you. The first steps of discipleship is going. The second step is knowing that God will show us. The third step is receiving the joy of discovery, little by little, step by step. My brothers and sisters, this is our Lenten journey. This is our continual conversion of life in a relationship with Jesus, being disciples, that Christ can transfigure us in spite of the fog.